word perplexed is a fascinating word. In its Latin form, the word is a compound word with two parts. The first, per, meaning forward through, and the second, plexus, meaning entangled. It's trying, in other words, to move forward through a twisted, messy situation. This is where we find Herod, the governor of Galilee, during the time of Christ. Herod Antipas, by name, was the son of a politician. His father, Herod the Great, had instituted the most vicious abortion policy, the massacre of children when he was angered because the wise men did not disclose the place of Jesus' birth, Matthew 2:16. Though his father, Herod the Great, had died, Herod Antipas was just as vicious as his father was. Yet there is a side to him that almost seems commendable. Luke tells us that he was the fourth person to interrogate Jesus before he was crucified. We read, "Now when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him because he had heard many things about him. And he hoped to see some miracle done by him," Luke 23 and verse 8. Pay special attention to Luke's descriptive words. Herod saw. Herod was a man with a vision. He recognized Jesus having never met him. He was glad. He not only recognized Jesus, his response almost seemed Christian. He is quite happy to meet the Messiah. Luke says he desired. Herod was a man with wishes, longings, and expectations. It's as if he, like the Jews who waited long for the Messiah, was also waiting. We read that Herod heard. He was an investigator with his ears to the ground, familiar with all the events in his province. Lastly, he hoped. He had expectation. He had a dream in mind for which he longed to see realized. But still he was perplexed. He had all the tools a man could use to move forward in life, but still he was perplexed. Luke tells us why, actually. Herod was perplexed because it was said by some that John had risen from the dead, and by some that Elijah had appeared, and by others that one of the old prophets had risen again, Luke 9 and verse 27. Herod was perplexed because there was just too many opinions to go off of. Though he was a man with vision, he valued the views of others supremely. His concern was to conform with those around him. He was not a man of conviction, but a chameleon who would change his stance to fit the occasion. This, by the way, describes our modern day politics and politicians. This is the world we live in now, and great evils come as a result of the great conformists who change their positions to fit the occasion. Herod was perplexed because he feared his secret sin would be exposed, and this is the second reason. He says, "John I have beheaded, but who is this of whom I hear such things?" So he sought to see him, Luke 9 and verse 9. Herod has been looking for Jesus since he silenced John. His effort to cover his sins led to further murder and murdering the prophet, the greatest one. He wanted to cover his sins still. So he was perplexed because though he wanted to see Jesus, he didn't really want to see him because he knew he had a sin that was still unrepented of and unconfessed, and so his sin was driving him toward a sign instead of salvation. So Herod was happy to see Jesus, not because he wanted forgiveness, but because he wanted to see a miracle. Herod was perplexed because he was so used to doing wrong that he could not recognize what was right any longer. We are told that he questioned Jesus with many words and pressed him for a sign. Luke says this, "Then he questioned him with many words, but Jesus answered him nothing." When I read this, it bothered me. Why didn't Jesus answer the politician? Then I finally realized it. Herod had silenced his convictions for so long and had refused to turn from his wicked ways, so much so that it skewed his perception. This day, desires were not going to work. Not only did he not get a sign, he also didn't hear a sound. Jesus knew that Herod had no place in his heart to surrender, and so Jesus would not waste a word on him. Don't be like Herod, perplexed because he valued the opinions of others more than his own convictions. Don't be like Herod, who was perplexed because he covered his sin for so long that he had no need for Jesus but entertainment. Don't be like Herod, who silences the voice of the truth tellers to the point where they're no longer willing to hear the truth.